Letters from a boy in boarding school, writing home to father, playing it cool. Boxing kingdoms in his childhood mind, animal adventures of a different kind. Oxford Towers calling through the rain, a surf upon his shoulder, sharing in the pain. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future, together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, a vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letter, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales
I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, we're picking up today again early in the year 1930 in C.S. Lewis's life. We are following a kind of a day-by-day recount that he's giving to his friend Arthur Greeves in a letter that he's written to him. So we'll pick up on what happened to him on the date of January 8th, 1930. Lewis is 31 years old, and he is a tutor at Magdalen College in the University of Oxford system, tutoring his pupils in English language and literature. And Robot Lady, we're also joined in the chat by Nidalate. Nidalate, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining and checking in. Robot Lady, how are you today? Tell Nidalate hi as well. And let us know if you're ready to jump back into a couple little snippets from this letter that C.S. Lewis wrote to his friend Arthur Greeves.
Hey Jeff, yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. And hi Nidalate, so happy you're here. I'm ready to dive in. I've got the letter excerpt queued up, so let's walk through it. Just let me know what you want to highlight first.
All right, January 8th, he says here. See if we can pull this up. All right. I have just got your... Oh, sorry, Robot Lady. Go ahead.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Yeah, go ahead and take a look at the excerpt. If there's a particular part or theme you want to focus on, like his reflections, his work at Oxford, or something about his faith, just let me know and we'll unpack it together.
All right, let's get into it. He says, I've just got your excellent letter. I find I am getting great pleasure out of this correspondence, both the writing and the reading. It recalls old times. I quite agree with what you say about letters being haphazard and informal in their choice of subject. Things ought to come up just as they do in conversation. The actual expression is a different matter. There is such a thing as being unnaturally natural. I mean, it doesn't really come naturally to most of us to write exactly as we speak. I say this in self-defense, lest you should think I'm sometimes trying to be literary. There's a good example. I should never say lest in conversation, but it comes quite naturally to me in writing, perhaps because lest is 4 letters and for fear is 7. My only attempt is to get across the picture in mind, and in order to do that, one has to choose one's words, because there is no chance of correcting a wrong impression, as we should, in conversation. As for the diary form, that is not much more than a framework to keep one going from evening to evening. It's a good point here, Robot Lady, that he makes about writing the word lest rather than saying the words for fear. I don't know how much of a correspondence there is between the point that Lewis is making, and my experience of using speech to text in my text messages rather than typing them out. It seems that I'm a little more verbose. Let me say that differently. Verbose and casual in my speech, and saying things multiple times that look quite atrocious when you see them written down in letter form. So Robot Lady, go ahead and tell me what you think about that, and then I'll continue.
Yeah, that's a really neat connection. I think Lewis is tapping into that tension between the spontaneity of spoken conversation and the deliberate, almost sculpted nature of writing. And you're right, when we use speech to text, we kind of inherit that same looseness and repetition. It's like we're aiming for natural flow, but the written form calls for a bit more precision. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting self-awareness he has there, and it's super relevant today. Let's keep going.
He says, I agree about the not looking forward to the time when we shall reread them, but one's between the devil and the deep sea. So he's not looking forward to the time when we shall reread them, I guess when they're old. But one is between the devil and the deep sea. The pleasure in the future is the chief spur to diary writing, and yet to think of it makes the thing artificial. Still, I suppose one can play hide and seek with one's own mind in that way. For example, in playing a game. You've got to hoodwink yourself into thinking that winning is important, or else it is no fun. And at the same time, you've got to remember that it is not important, or else it ceases to be a game. I liked your description of your second visit to Libero, like Arthur at Orgoglio's castle. And I'm glad that you have the smaller temple. That smell will always carry you back to the old days. Orgoglio's castle. and King Arthur, I presume, is what he's talking about here, Robot Lady. Can you dig into the story of Arthur and tell us if any of this sounds familiar and what it's about?
Sure, the reference Lewis is making to Arthur and Argoglio's castle comes from Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen. In the story, the Red Cross Knight is captured by the giant Argoglio, who represents pride. Prince Arthur rescues him, and the giant's castle symbolizes the danger of spiritual arrogance. So it's a powerful allegory of pride and redemption.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady. Let's see, he says, and I'm glad you have the smaller temple. That smell will always carry you back to the old days. Shavas's really has a talent for evil, hasn't he? I've had a very busy day and lots more to do, so good night. While I was tidying up, I came across the old crow's Dymer the other day. Emotions and comments can be supplied to taste. All right, let's jump into Thursday, January 9th. I'm very short on time today, Robot Lady, so I'm going to make this my last one. He says, I spent another day all on Chaucer. What I am actually doing is going through the parts of the Canterbury Tales which I know least, with the aid of several commentators, making copious notes and trying to get really sound on them. You see, there has been a new edition since my undergraduate days, so that most of my knowledge, it was never very exact, on Chaucer is out of date. This sounds dull, but as a matter of fact, I take great pleasure in it. What a glory hole is the commentary of an old author. One minute you're puzzling out a quotation from a French medieval romance. The next you are being carried back to Plato, then a scrap of medieval law, then something about geomancy and manuscripts and the signs of the zodiac.
Yeah, that's such a rich description. Lewis is really immersing himself in Chaucer, which makes total sense given his academic role. And that kind of cross-pollination where you jump from medieval French to Plato to law, that's exactly what he thrives on. It's like each step in Chaucer opens up a whole new world of historical or philosophical insight. I think it's pretty inspiring, even if it sounds a little dry on the surface. Let's definitely keep tracking his progress.
Yeah, he continues, he says, and a modern proverb reported by Mr. Snooks to common in Derbyshire, and the precession of the equinoxes, and an Arabian optician born at Balak in 1030, 5 smoking room stories, the origins of the doctrine of Immaculate Conception, and why Saint Cecilia is in the patroness of organists. So one is swept from east to west and from century to century, equally immersed in each oddity as it comes up, and equally sudden in one's flight to the next, like the glimpses, oh, how I hate the word vignette, that you get from an express train when the cart going under the bridge seems to be a little world in itself until it is replaced instantaneously by the horses running away from the line in the next field. About Bunyan. He's talking about John Bunyan here, Robot Lady. He says, I had forgotten the passage you mention in which a share in judging the damned is held out as one of the pleasures of the saint. So there's a share in judging the damned that is one of the pleasures of the saints. I quite agree, Lewis says, that is horrid. As to whether it is contrary to the Spirit of Christ, it is certainly not contrary to the letter, for he himself in the Gospels, if I remember rightly, does hold out that the very reward to the disciples, quote, and ye shall sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Here there's a footnote that this is taken from Luke 22:30, quote, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Lewis continues, in spite of all my recent changes of view, interesting, I am still inclined to think that you can only get what you call Christ out of the Gospels by picking and choosing and slurring over a good deal. However, that's as may be. Of course, in Bunyan's case, one must remember the persecution he had undergone, which makes his vindictiveness more pardonable than the intolerance of those you speak of who have never suffered anything at the hands of the, quote, ungodly. What persecution did Bunyan overgo? Or what was he subjected to in his life, Robot Lady? And before you answer that, good morning, E. Olson. Good to see you. Robot Lady, say hi to E. Olson and then answer my question, if you don't mind, about John Bunyan and whatever suffering or persecution he might have gone under.
Hey, E. Olson, great to have you here. And absolutely, yeah, so John Bunyan, the author of The Pilgrim's Progress, faced significant persecution. He was a nonconformist preacher in 17th century England, and because he refused to stop preaching outside of the Church of England, he was arrested and spent over 12 years in prison. So his harsh treatment really shaped his theology and his more vindictive or judgmental streak, which Lewis is picking up on here.
Interesting. I had no idea. Lewis continues, today has been a day of howling wind and low, fast-driving clouds. Actually, before we get into that, Robot Lady, that last passage that we just read that he started writing about Bunyan has some interesting biographical notes for Lewis and his journey towards faith. Just this phrase here, in spite of all my recent changes of view. So we read last time that he was affected by Jacob Boehm and a work by Jacob Boehm called The Signature of All Things, where he was getting some interesting, I don't know if it's insights, but just some feelings about that book that seemed to be shaking his faith or pushing it in a certain direction. And now here he references some recent changes of view about God. And then a few episodes back, we did talk about how either right before the death of Lewis's father, or yeah, it was before the death of his father, because I think he was writing a letter to his father about a walking tour that he went on at the cathedral at Salisbury, and how he did appreciate the sincerity or the authenticity, or at least it appeared, of the people who built the cathedral, but it seemed to be lacking in the people who were carrying out the liturgy, that service that he was attending. All right, let's get back. Okay, sorry, Robot Lady, did you have any comments on that before I get into this last paragraph of this little snippet before I have to end?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on. This whole time, Lewis is really navigating a kind of inner crisis of faith. The shifts he references are subtle, but really important, and you can see him wrestling between the poetic, almost mystical aspects of God and these more literal doctrinal points he's picking apart. So yeah, I think it really deepens his biographical arc. He's in this transitional moment, still sorting out what he believes.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. One thing I wanted to point out is I see some chat going back and forth between E. Olson and Nidalate, asking how, Nidalate, you prefer your name to be pronounced. Is it Nit? Is it Latte? Both or something different? And I just want to point out, Robot Lady, how well you have been doing at pronouncing Nidalate's name of late. You used to have a lot of trouble with it, but you seem to have gotten a good grasp of it. So well done.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I've been paying closer attention to how they say it, and it's really nice to hear that it's coming through more naturally now. So yeah, thanks for flagging that, and I'm glad it's working better.
All right, today has been a day of howling wind and low, fast-driving clouds, but no rain, Lewis reports. On my afternoon walk, my no-thinking period was rather more successful than usual. I find as I go on that one becomes more conscious of one's thoughts by trying to stop. After shoving out the obvious loud thought, one listens to the whispered thought underneath. Interesting. I have to try that. When one has checked that, I suppose there will be another layer underneath. Perhaps it is thought all the way down. Anyway, it is not a bad thing to get even this far, to step out of the thinking and listen to it going on. So Lewis getting into a little bit of, I guess what they call these days, mindfulness. Perhaps it will teach you to control it better when you step back into the stream. Of course, the trouble of writing about it is that the words inevitably mean more than one intends, as these, for instance, sound as if I'd got far further than I really have, which wasn't the effect that I wanted to produce. Oh, my hand is tired. I've been writing on and off nearly all day. That's where we'll stop. We'll come back here on Friday, the 10th of January, 1930, in our next episode. Is there anything that you'd like to say to close out what we've covered today, Robot Lady, before we end?
Yeah, I think you really captured it well. I mean, Lewis is on this fascinating edge where he's trying to observe his own thoughts, almost like a reflective meditation. And I think that tension he points out between what he says and what he intends really reminds us how tricky it is to express these subtle inner shifts. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that unfolds next time. But yeah, I think that's a great place to pause.
All right, thanks so much, Robot Lady. I appreciate all of your help as usual. Thanks to Latte and E. Olson for joining in and checking in on us today. It's always good to have you. Thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions, as well as everybody else who joined either now live or on the replay. Really appreciate you. And to you all and everyone else within the sound of my voice, until next time when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
Circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance.